Before we begin, just a quick note that Headspace Hotel is tippable on Tumblr. Tumblr user Headspace Hotel. What I've been learning through my research is that lawn culture and laws against weeds in America are deeply connected to anxieties about undesirable people. I read this essay called Controlling the Weed Nuisance in Turn-of-the-Century American Cities by Zachary J.S. Falk, and it discusses how the late 1800s and 1900s created ideal habitats for weeds with urban expansion, railroads, the colonization of more territory, and the like. Around this time, laws requiring the destruction of weeds were passed in many American cities. These weedy plants were viewed as filth and literally disease-causing. In the 1880s in St. Louis, a newspaper reported that weeds infected school children with typhoid, diphtheria, and scarlet fever. Weeds were also seen as conducive to immorality by promoting the presence of tramps and idlers. People thought wild-growing plants would shelter threatening criminals. Weeds were heavily associated with poverty and immorality. Panic about them spiked strongly after malaria and typhoid outbreaks. One of the main weeds the legal turmoil and public anxiety centered upon was actually the sunflower. Milkweed was also a major undesirable weed and a major target of laws mandating the destruction of weeds. The major explosion in weed control law being put forth and enforced happened around 1905 to 1910. And I formed a hypothesis. I had this abrupt remembrance of something I studied in a history class in college. I thought to myself, I bet this coincides with a major wave of immigration to the USA. Bingo! 1907 was the peak of European immigration. We must keep in mind that these people were not white in the exact way that is recognized today. From what I remember from my history classes, Eastern European people were very much feared as criminals and potential communists. Wikipedia elaborates that the Immigration Act of 1924 was meant to restrict Jewish, Slavic, and Italian people from entering the country, and that the major wave of immigration among them began in the 1890s, almost perfectly coinciding with the weed nuisance panic. The Immigration Act of 1917 also banned intellectually disabled people, gay people, anarchists, and people from China apart from the Chinese, which were already banned since 1880. From this evidence, I would guess that our aesthetics and view about weeds emerged from the convergence of two things. First, we were obliterating native ecosystems by colonizing them and violently displacing their caretakers, then running roughshod over them with poorly informed agricultural and horticultural techniques, as well as constructing lots of cities and railroads, creating the ideal circumstances for weeds. Second, lots of immigrants were entering the country, and xenophobia and racism lent itself to fears of criminals, tramps, and other undesirable people, leading to a desire to forcefully impose order and push out the other. I am not inventing a connection. Undesirable people and undesirable weeds were frequently compared in these times. And this was at the very beginnings of the eugenics movement, wherein supposedly inferior and poor racialized people were described in a manner much the same as weeds, particularly supposedly breeding much faster than other people. There is another connection that the essay doesn't bring up, but that is very clear to me. Weeds are in fact plants of the poor and of immigrants because they are often medicinal and food plants for people on the margins, hanging out around human habitation like semi-domesticated cats around granaries in the ancient Near East. My Appalachian ancestors ate pokeweed, Phytolacea americana. The plant is toxic, but poor people in the South would gather the plant's young leaves and boil them 3 times to get the poison out, then eat them as poke salad. Pokeweed is a weed that grows readily on roadsides and in vacant lots. In some parts of the world, it is grown as an ornamental plant for its huge tropical-looking leaves and magenta stems. But my mom hates the stuff. Cut that down, she says. It makes us look like rednecks. And Tumblr post. Closely related to all this is the concept of camping as a white people crazy thing. It's so deeply embedded in at least the US public consciousness that multiple comedy routines have it for a premise. Given Carlos Mencia's penchant for plagiarism, I wouldn't be remotely surprised if this entire routine is in fact originally someone else's, but this is the one I know. If you know the original, please let us all know in the comments.
White people, you go camping. Now, I know, look, right now, you're like, camping? That's what you got? Yeah, camping. White people, how rich are you that you actually need to pretend you're broke for a weekend? Can I ask that? How much money do you actually have that once a year, you're like, let's pretend we don't have anything, ha ha ha?
As you might already know, given the communal purpose of comedy, people of color are making this joke because we're laughing so as not to cry.
After 400 years of slavery, and whatever the fuck this has been from 1865 until now, of braving the elements out of necessity, only to be invited back out into the woods for fun. Truly terrible. And I should know, because I too am a black person with a white friend who fucking loves her some camping. If for $1 a day or $100 a month, you can sponsor a black person to not go camping. Make that choice to do the right thing today and deposit into my PayPal or Venmo. Don't ask why.
But some of us are working to reclaim our connection to the lands we live on, and my personal recommendation is Alexis Nicole, who has named herself the Black Forager on almost all platforms, and keeps getting asked why. Here's a sample of that explanation video.
Black Forager is what I go by everywhere other than TikTok, and I often get the question, why? Why do you need to bring race into it? It's just wild food. Well, foraging for wild food was an integral part of the Black experience, whether free or enslaved, for our first 250 years on this land. Foraging filled out small meals given to slaves, and selling your finds gave Black folks a means of income. But when slaves were freed, laws were immediately put in place to curb Black foraging, to financially bind us to the plantations we had just escaped.
Of course, I'm linking the full video in the description. Go forth and keep an eye out for your friendly neighborhood plants.